All right. Looks like we've got some folks joining us. I'll give us a couple minutes before I get started. But welcome and thanks for coming. Give it a couple more minutes before we jump in. As you join, feel free to let us know in the chat who you are, where you're joining us from, and if you understand the reference on our title slide. Don't worry if you don't. I'll spoil it for you once we get started. All right, it's 101, so let's go ahead and jump in. The great news is I don't like really long webinars, and so I don't expect you to sit through one either. So we're going to get through this one nice and quickly. But for folks who are not familiar with me, I'm Angela Brown. I'm the Director of Marketing at Hulda, and today we are going to talk about yield. If you have not seen the America's Next Top Model documentary on Netflix, that show had its own reality check this week. And so now we're going to have ours. And specifically, we're going to be talking about some levers that you can pull to get students to the finish line right now without peppering them with lots of messages and reminders. It is going to be a tactical discussion. And my goal is for you to leave with at least one workflow that you can steal and run with in the next couple of weeks. And I just heard a notification that I do not want to hear. So I am going to make sure all of the things are closed so I don't have to bug you with those things. Perfect. And now, before we start, I also want to mention we're going to take a look at how AI can lighten some of the load for you so you don't have to worry about some things like segmentation and messaging and doing all that work manually. So let's jump in. Starting with some housekeeping, everyone always asks, yes, the webinar is being recorded. You'll receive a copy of this recording tomorrow in your inboxes, and you'll also be able to find it on our website. If you want to rewatch it or share it with a friend or colleague, please do. And if you have a question or you want to contribute, you don't have to wait until the end to do that. I'll be putting some prompts in throughout the conversation for you to drop some commentary or some color into the chat, and you can do that at any time. They're on the right side of your screen. So first, I want to ground us in the moment in time that we're in. Many of you might be seeing some decent application or admit numbers, but a little bit more risk in the admit to enroll piece. So that is why we're here. We know that students are applying to more and more institutions every year, but they're keeping those commitments pretty slim. And they are expecting very personalized, very fast communication in a variety of channels that they use on a day-to-day basis. But the sort of mass marketing that we used to isn't working anymore. That's what we're here to talk about. And when I was looking at the registration list, we have a lot of directors here, and I know that you all are the ones who are translating strategy into segments and messages and student journeys. So we're really going to focus on that and what you can do in the next few weeks. So before we dive in, I am going to launch a quick poll. I would love to know what your biggest late cycle blocker is. Don't be shy. It's anonymous. The poll is only fun if you respond. And if there is an option that you don't see here, please drop it into the chat. That's important too. We want to make sure that we capture everyone. So I'm seeing some cost and ROI, which is great because that's actually going to be the focus of our content later in this session. competition. That's very real. I'll give us a couple more seconds before I close us. The cost and ROI is pulling ahead yet again. Okay. Okay, that's great, actually, because this is something that we're going to be covering as we go through. So I'm going to go ahead and close this for us. Pull this down. Worked out beautifully. Get those slides back up and running. Okay, this is perfection because we're going to spend a lot of time on that. So here is what we're going to actually build together in the next 25 minutes or so. And you don't necessarily have to go through this with me. There is going to be a worksheet that I'll share with you at the end. But if you want to sort of work along, grab a pen and paper, and you can definitely do that with me. So first, we're going to start with a quick and dirty triage process that you can run in less than an hour because we like to get through things quickly. Nobody has a lot of time for a population that you're worried about. So we're just going to pick one. Then we're going to go through a process for rewriting a high impact cost and ROI message. Aligns beautifully with our poll results with a couple of segment specific variants. And then we're going to talk about a template for a 2-week high touch mini campaign with some ideas for how AI can help you design and refine it. You do not have to implement every single thing that we talk about, but if you can walk away with something that you can run with once we're done, that's a win for everybody. That's my hope in putting this together for you. So to make this real, we're going to start with the one population, as I mentioned, and I want you to think about where you're feeling most exposed with yield. It could be a specific program, local commuters, first-gen students, whatever the case may be. You want that group to be a meaningful size with a clear deposit timeline and at least have some engagement data for you to reference. If you want, you can drop that population that's top of mind for you in the chat. I love to hear from you as we go. It can't just be me talking, but that can help you to mentally anchor the examples that we're going to go through as we keep going. It's also helpful for the group just to see where everyone's at. So now we're going to talk about that simple triage workflow that you can do in under an hour. So the first step is to take a list of admits for the population that popped into your brain on the last slide, include an email, program, event attendance, visits, aid status, any engagement score that you might have from your CRM or from a predictive modeling partner that you might be working with. Then we're going to add 2 more columns, one for intent and one for cost sensitivity. So for intent, you want to look at things like true activities. You want to look at visits, events, logins, replies to emails. For cost, you want to think about things like grant eligibility, if they're first gen, unmet needs, scholarship questions that have popped up. Then we're going to give each student a quick HM or L label for each column. So don't overthink it. If it's rough, that's totally fine. But those labels are going to be used to create 4 buckets. So we'll have our high intent, low cost sensitivity bucket, our high intent, high cost sensitivity bucket, medium intent, and low intent. So to make those extra real, as an example, a student who has visited campus twice and has low unmet need is probably in the high intent, low cost sensitivity category. So they just need a really clear path to deposit versus a student who clicks on every aid email, hasn't visited campus, and has a high unmet need. They're going to be in the high-ish intent, but high cost sensitivity bucket, and they're going to need some aid and some strong messaging around ROI. So if you are thinking, how in the world am I going to do that? This is a place where AI can really help. So instead of having to juggle multiple data points for every student, you can use some models like I talked about to combine those signals into a simple likelihood to enroll or needs attention score. And then you can surface some patterns like students with this combination of behaviors tend to enroll if they get an additional aid clarification, or students like this typically melt if they don't visit campus. Some of you are going to have this built into your CRM, or you might have a predictive modeling partner. Others might be using platforms like ours that can pull behavior from your website, from your emails, from text messages, and use more simple scores that tell you who's most likely to take some action if they have the right nudge. Then, when you have a meeting to talk about triage, instead of starting from a raw spreadsheet, you have your prioritized list, and you can say something like, these are the 150 admits in this population who look high intent and high risk financially. So, you're starting from a more focused place instead of a blank slate. And these are the types of problems that we really try to help our partners to solve. It's pulling this context and behavior together for you so you know who's more likely to take action if you engage them differently instead of treating everyone the same. So by the end of that exercise, the goal is for you to have something as simple as this on paper or in a document. So for each quadrant, you're going to want to write, what do we actually plan to do for this group this month? For your high intent, low cost folks, it's probably some strong nudges to deposit and crystal clear logistics. For the high intent, high cost sensitivity students, some personalized aid review, plus a sequence that explains value and outcomes. And we'll get to a little bit more of that in a bit. For medium intent, you can invite them to one focus campaign that gives them a reason to get a little bit more connected. And for your low intent folks, that's more of a light nurture and monitoring in case they decide to re-engage. And these are people too that you might have some triggers already in place in your CRM system that can allow you to reach back out to these students if they hit certain thresholds. But if you create this for even one population and share it with your team, you're already adding some more intentionality to your work around yield. So next, we're going to move to cost and ROI messaging, since we know that finances can be a really big blocker for students. And instead of trying to fix everything, we're going to choose one message that a lot of admits are going to see and that it clearly influences decisions. So you can use some historical data to tease that out. But some typical candidates might be your initial admit email, your financial aid offer email, deposit reminders, here's what your offer means kind of message. So you want to think about, if this message was clearer and more relevant to the student, could it realistically move the needle for this group? So take a couple seconds, jot down a message that kind of pops into your mind. You don't have to do this, but I find it helpful to write these things down as I go. You'll also be able to do it with the worksheet that I'm going to share with you at the very end of this session. So this is a really simple framework that you can use to upgrade that message, and really any message that falls into this category. So you want to start with one plain language sentence. The word choice is so important, and I'll dig even deeper into that in the next slide, but use the words that they use. So here's what your offer means in real terms. And then one or two bullets on what makes this possible for the student, depending on what makes sense for your institution, what their concerns happen to be, and one sentence about cost and support. So here's roughly what it will cost, how we're going to help you manage it, and then finish with a single clear next step and deadline. That singularity is really important. Keeping the message focused is really important because students are already feeling overwhelmed. They're getting these communications from a lot of different institutions. It's a challenging process. You can walk your own team through this structure in a quick work session. And I am going to show you what this can look like in practice right here. So if we look at our first message on the left, this is pretty standard issue, right? You've got pretty generic subject line. It could come from anyone, right? And then we've got a lot of text, a lot of information, a lot of numbers, a lot of jargon. And when you get down to the end, there's a lot of steps that can actually they feel like they're filled with friction. Logging into a portal, accepting your package within 30 days. Okay, well, what's 30 days from now? Now I have to pull up a calendar and figure out how much time I have. And then you have to contact the Office of Financial Aid with questions. Do I email that? Do I make a phone call? Who do I connect with? All of those are blockers for the student. Versus the option on the right, where right out of the gate, it already feels warmer because we're using that you and your language. We're not even putting a merge field or the student's name here. You can definitely do that, but it automatically feels different from the subject line in the first example. Then, bottom line up front, we tell them exactly what they want to know in the first sentence, bold text. Here's what it's actually going to cost you to come here next year. Then we give them a breakdown using plain language. Again, using bold text to highlight things and break up copy. It's really simple and really effective. We reinforce the cost at the end, so you're not trying to figure out, you're not asking the student to do math as they're reading the email, right? We don't want to do that. We immediately follow up with ROI. So here's the average salary that our grads earn. Here's what you could expect in terms of when you could potentially pay this back. Accept your aid by March 1, super clear, concrete date. Here's your 5-minute link. So we're managing the expectation around how much time it's going to take them to actually take this action. And if you have questions, just send us a text like you would anyone else. We make it really easy. And AI can be helpful here as a drafting partner for you, just to get you past that blank page. And I will show you how. So you can take this framework and actually create a prompt with it just by saying, write an admit email that explains net price in one sentence, connects cost to career outcomes, gives a clear next step by the blank date, whatever that date is for you, and sounds like our brand, provided that you've done some of the background work to include your branding and style guide information for that LLM or for whatever tool you happen to be using. Then you can ask it to generate different versions for your high intent, high cost students versus your high intent, low cost students versus the students that are in that still kind of thinking about it and exploring group. Then your job is to review the drafts, choose the parts that feel right, and then edit them into something that is on brand for you. So you're starting from multiple tailored options instead of a blank page, which is ideal. So now we're going to pull this together into a small but focused campaign. So start with your triage bucket. It could be your high intent, high cost for a specific program or local students who haven't visited yet. And then set one clear goal. So it could be anything from 25 more deposits to getting 50 students to complete a missing step. Then choose a simple channel mix. So let's say one email, 2 texts, and one short event or an FAQ session over the course of about 2 weeks. The key is not to create a comprehensive all admit campaign. It's a precise effort with one segment where attention could potentially influence their decision. So we're taking it's that scalpel and chainsaw example, right? We're using a scalpel and lots of precision here. So here's what that could look like over the course of a couple of weeks. And the one thing I want to call out before I walk through this is just how few touch points students are receiving. So this is not about peppering them with messages. And we're using a mix of channels. So we're starting with a tailored email that explains the offer in clear cost and ROI terms. We're using that plain language again and inviting them to a Q&A or a visit. We wait a couple days, they get a nudge via text that says something like, any questions about your offer or next steps? Reply and we'll help. Then a few days later, we have a quick micro event with a mix of staff and current students that's focused on this group's biggest concerns. A few days later, a reminder text to people who registered but didn't show, or they showed interest but haven't taken any action to move forward. And then we send a final email that reinforces the decision timeline and makes the next step really obvious. So if you're thinking about a specific population right now, you can plug them into this pattern. So now, as we're thinking about the AI of it all, here's where AI can support that campaign lifecycle, and it's in 2 key ways. With segmentation, it can help you determine which students actually fit your target pattern. So let's say it's the high intent, high cost with a certain program without you having to manually slice and dice a bunch of filters. We don't want you to have to deal with that. And then with creative, it can generate copy with different subject lines, different pieces of content that are tuned to the concerns of the segment that you're focused on. So you can choose the best ones instead of having to start from scratch and spend a lot of time on ideation. So it's more about having to make some choices instead of, again, starting from that blank page. And as you think about making this repeatable, that's going to be the real leverage, is turning this into something that you can use not just this year, but in future years. So for every at-risk population, you can run through this same pattern. You triage the pool, pick a message to upgrade, and design a mini campaign. And you can use this format to create little playbooks for specific groups. So here's our online nursing playbook. Here's our grad business playbook. Here's our playbook for local commuters. But that way, in future years, you're just making some refinements instead of having to reinvent the wheel. And then AI comes back in because it becomes something that can help you accelerate each of these steps instead of having to start over. And you're still in control of the strategy and the quality, while AI is cutting the time and the guesswork for you. So I told you this was going to be nice and quick. To close this out, here's what I would suggest over the course of the next week. Start by blocking out an hour with a small group, run the triage exercise for one population, and fill out the worksheet that I'm going to share with you on the next slide. Then spend some time rewriting a high impact cost ROI message. You can use AI to draft a few segment variations and then edit them together. And then you want to block out some more time to map and actually schedule your 2-week micro campaign for that same population. So we're not talking about boiling the ocean. That's too much and you don't have time, right? But if you do this for just one population this month, for one thing, you're going to learn a lot and you could see some real movement and take those lessons into the next cycle. So here's my next step for you. I have a couple before we go to Q&A. First, you can scan the QR code on the left if you want to talk AI strategy with a member of our team. And the second QR code, as I mentioned, is a worksheet that you can use with your team in the next couple weeks if you want to apply what we've covered today. The good news here is you are going to receive a copy of this presentation tomorrow when you get the recording. So no worries if you don't have to bring your phone out right now. I'll make sure that you have a copy of this so that you can use the worksheet and start digging into that next week. And you can follow up with us if you would like. And that is all I have for you today. Nice and quick. It's a busy time of year. So we wanted to give you some quick wins that you can execute and take and run with. Are there any questions before we wrap? My goodness, you guys are going easy on me. Okay, well, if you don't have any questions, that is totally fine. I'm going to drop my email address into the chat here. So if something comes to mind later, you can feel free to reach out to me. You'll also receive your recording from me tomorrow. So keep an eye on your inboxes for that. Like I mentioned, you'll get the recording and a copy of the slides. Definitely check out the worksheet. Would love to get your feedback on that. And if you have shower thoughts or something pops into your head later, feel free to reply to tomorrow's email, and I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining.